Vermil Magad Chahirli, and my thank you to the Social Democrats for using their time to put the spotlight on this topic. But we need more than a spotlight. We need continued light through the democratic process of TDs answering questions and getting answers. And Minister, I'm afraid I'm not reassured here, and really I have a difficulty when things are personalised. But somewhere, something is very wrong in your department, let me say that. I'm looking at your speech and weasel words come to mind. Absolute weasel words, and we deserve more than that, but those who went forward and took their courage in their hands deserve a lot more than that. I have raised this matter, I've checked on the 4th of February, the 10th of February, the 11th of February, the 17th of February. I was told the evidence was gone. And you know why it was gone? To protect people's confidentiality. A terrible reply. People's confidentiality, as you well know, can be protected in many ways. And indeed, of the 550 people approximately who came forward, only a small group asked for their anonymity to be to the fore. I think 60. So what that tells us, ministers, that overwhelmingly people came forward to say, please publish our stories, people, please listen to us. Not alone were those stories not published, but lies were told. I use that word very advisedly. Lies were told that the evidence was destroyed. Now we find out it wasn't destroyed at the last minute. And that in itself raises questions about the whole trust of this process. Because if a commission of inquiry tells us on page 11 of the confidential report that the evidence was destroyed, and it turns out there were backup tapes that they didn't tell us about, that brings the whole trust of what they've told us into, and you haven't mentioned that today. It's pretty serious that we were told that on page 11, ostensibly in the patronising patriarchal language, that we were doing it for their good. And we look at these weasel words. You're not opposing the motion, but what are you doing? Are you extending the time for the time necessary? I'm not sure. I understand the sentiment of it. I don't think a year is necessary. I firmly of the belief that a commission of inquiry is independent. But this is beyond independence. There are serious practical questions here to be answered. How were we told it was destroyed, then not destroyed? How, on what basis, what legal basis? What time is necessary? Are you happy to stand into the shoes of the Commission as the most important person in the government at the moment if there's a judicial review? Just clarify that for us. Clarify when the testimonies, the transcript will be written out of these tapes, by whom and when they'll be available. So they're the two issues for me. That there's a body there that can be the subject of a judicial review, notwithstanding how difficult that is for ordinary people on the ground. Clarify that today. Take your courage in your hand, please. It's not what I deserve, it's what the people deserve. And secondly, in relation to the testimonies, when will they be written out? When will that transcript be available? When will the report on the St Patrick's Guild's Home be published? When will you tell us the result of your investigation into the leak of the report? When will you tell us, has everybody who asked for a copy got a copy? When will it go to the libraries? How can you ask anybody to rectify their testimony if they don't have a copy of the report in the first place, and secondly, a copy of the transcript from the recording? For God's sake, and again I use the word God, you know, we have somebody here in this department, or a group of people, telling people what's best, not learning anything at all. And therefore, that's your role, unfortunately maybe. You might embrace that role and begin to lead. I've asked you this before. You'll have my full support if you lead. But this is not leading. This is a weasel words all over again, and the same weasel words that were used in the report. And finally, I'll conclude by saying, I listened to an interview yesterday with a former Supreme Court judge referring to an article in the Irish Times. And honestly, the content of that shocked me to my core, and I thought I'm old enough not to be shocked. The manner of that, what was reported in the paper yesterday or the day before, is truly shocking. It's clearly the troops have rounded up the boys' club, but on this occasion there are women, unfortunately, in the boys' club, protecting what should not be protected.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Thank you. Next, we have the government, and it's 10 minutes, and we have Minister Anne Rabbitte. Please, sure. Thank you, Minister.
I thank the deputies for their contribution to the debate. In your motion put forward today, you outline why opposition believe an extension to the Commission is necessary. I'll quote from your motion here: to extend the term of the Commission for another 12 months to facilitate a review into the destruction of the recordings and to allow for the potential salvaging of remaining testimony. It is positive for some that this extension now doesn't need to happen because the resulting outcome has already been met. The tapes and the stories on them have been found. But this does, however, raise some serious issues. 80 people have already come forward to request that their recordings be redacted. They say they only engaged with the Commission because they believed that their stories would not be made public and would be destroyed to protect their privacy. In the motion brought forward today by opposition, I note a line early on that stated many survivors have refuted the Commission's claim that permission was sought from witnesses regarding the destruction of their testimonies. There was no mention, however, of the many survivors who stated that they're engaged solely on the basis that their testimonies would be redacted. I spoke to Sheila 2 nights ago. You all know her. She stood outside the Dáil for the last 4 years, and as we would be going in and different motions would be coming forward to us, she would ask us that she wanted her story heard, she wanted her pain to be removed, and she wanted the government to make amends. I spoke to Aintus yesterday, and they want it not to be progressed. They want us to actually start with the information and tracing. They want us to start at looking at the burials legislation. I spoke to representatives, of which Deputy Grealish has already mentioned there, the Mother and Baby Home Alliance Group, to Pat and to Liam, whose members also want access to their medical cards. They don't want it to be extended. They want access. They want supports. Sheila says she hasn't been contacted by any member of the opposition. She rang me because she's terrified that this commission will be extended. She says she's getting older, along with her fellow survivors, and for us to extend the commission would mean that yet again she'll be left waiting for redress, repatriation and for closure. I'm not putting the cohort of survivors that I have spoken to up against the cohort of survivors that you have spoken to. I'm only telling the story of Sheila to highlight the fact that survivors of the mother and baby homes are not one homogenous group. They do not have one grand need or want from government. Each of them have their own experiences and their own needs. You know this, I know this, and for anyone to bunch them together once again for questionable political gains with catchy hashtags and headlines-grabbing soundbites is disheartening. Nobody should be trying to utilise or weaponise survivors' trauma for their own gains, whether it's political, academia or otherwise. And as for Parliament and as society, we can do better and we must do better. Survivors deserve this and society as a whole deserves this. I am always happy to sit across from opposition, or previously when I was in opposition, to sit opposite government. I'm happy to debate, to criticise, to challenge and to hold to account. But on this issue, it is not fair for you to cast government in the role as some kind of villain. Since I was first elected to this chamber, I have always wanted justice for the mother and babies home survivors. That is not and will not change. Minister Gorman, along with my colleagues in government, have always focused on the concerns of the survivors. He has successfully engaged with the Commission and secured the audio recordings of the confidential committee. The fact that these recordings were destroyed and then not destroyed is like something out of an episode of Father Ted. The content of those tapes should have always been treated as sacred. If I was to track an IKEA delivery to somewhere in my own home in East Galway, I would know it bit by bit all the way. And the same thing should have happened with these files. They should have been minded like the most precious, but only for the Minister's continuous engagement with them, they would have been destroyed. That's why I'm relieved that Minister O'Gorman will become the data controller of these records from the 28th. He can provide an avenue for people who consented to the recordings of their interview to seek access to their personal data. He can also ensure that those people who wanted their testimonies redacted have that right. We need to learn from this and consider how commissions of investigations operate, and it's not right or proper that survivors have their trust in institutions shaken yet again. The Government has accepted the Commission's report and its recommendations and has responded with a commitment to a strategic action plan spanning 22 ambitious actions. Initial work is already underway and an action plan across many of actions. Access to the birth and early life information, including the birth certificate, is a fundamental issue and a top priority for government. Officials in the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth are working with the Office of the Attorney-General to advance information and tracing legislation with a view of heading bills by the end of March, early April. The Government has committed to a scheme of restorative recognition and has established the interdepartmental group to work with this. They held this first meeting on the 4th of February and will hold their second meeting again tomorrow, and they will report back to Minister Gorman by the end of April. It has been asked to develop detailed proposals for a restorative recognition scheme. Its work must take account of the specific groups identified by the Commission, but it is not limited just to those groups. The work will be underpinned by a human rights focus. It will be informed by the strong stakeholder consultation and an understanding of the criticism that was made by previous commissions and by previous schemes. But restorative recognition is more than just financial compensation. One strand of the scheme will involve the provision of an enhanced medical card similar to that provided to the former residents of the Magdalen laundries, and the IDG proposals will also encompass this element. In the immediate term, counselling services are available for all former residents through the National Counselling Service in the HSE. This includes telephone and face-to-face counselling through an established nationwide network of counselling locations. All former residents will have access to a patient advocacy liaison support service. In addition, a targeted programme of health research will be undertaken to assist and inform the development of future service provision for former residents, and preparatory work on this research study has begun. The overarching theme for all of this work is a commitment to progressing it in a survivor-centred manner, characteristic by continuous engagement with former residents and their representatives groups, as well as survivors living overseas. This can only happen through a radically enhanced model of engagement with the necessary scale to support the many voices and perspectives in that space. Minister Gorman is committed to establishing such a model following consultation, and he has met with the collaborative forum twice in the last 2 weeks to discuss other issues. We have approached today's debate with the survivors at the centre of its considerations. Its focus has been on seeking to engage with the concerns raised by survivors in relation to the audio recordings, and this focus has resulted in a positive outcome. Responding to the needs and wishes of survivors will be paramount as we focus on delivering on Government's response to the Commission's report.
Thank